Hello, everybody. Sean Reynolds and Ken Weeb from Sportsnet here for your post-game show after another one where the Jets came up short. Fifth straight loss for the Winnipeg Jets. Sixth straight against the Edmonton Oilers. Ken, if you take a look at the numbers just specifically, it looks like a terrible situation for the Winnipeg Jets. Is there a reason for optimism following a game like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were much better defensively, Sean, there's no doubt. Jets did a much better job at even strength, but having said that, they were unable to solve the Oilers' power play this evening, and special teams a critical factor, and the Jets pressed, but having a little trouble with the finish around the net right now. Obviously, that save on Paul Stastny, in the first period was probably the best chance the Jets had. I mean, Koskinen just did a great job of getting the paddle down, but again, you got to find a way, right? I mean, this was a team that was in a desperation situation, having lost 4 in a row. They were, it was a one-sided, lopsided loss the other night against the Oilers. They wanted to respond, and again, I think that it was a much better effort, but again, we know that in sports there's not really a moral victory component available. But Sean, I would say, as you talked about on the pregame show, this sort of reminded me of that other skid last year where you could sort of see down this was the template in terms of 5-on-5 play. So, I mean, again, are the Jets feeling better about themselves than they did the other night? Of course. I mean, nobody likes to lose, but they didn't get embarrassed tonight. They didn't hang their goalie out to dry, but they still have to find another level, because that level is not going to get it done in the playoffs, right? I mean, you got to find a way to score goals. I mean, they were facing a backup goalie. And again, we talked about it again during the pregame show. I thought this was an expert move by Dave Tippett. He knew that his team already had full control of the season series. So you play the backup goalie. If the backup goalie finds a way to win, now you think you've planted the seed of doubt even deeper into your opponent. And if the Jets had found a way to win, the Oilers would be like, oh, well, big deal. They beat our backup goalie. Again, the players are not thinking that, but it's right out of the coach's manual.
It's a mind game. It's a mind game. You get to hang off that. Well, here, I want this to bring in this question from Brent Palachuk. The team can't score and play defense at the same time. I've wondered all season about the balance of this team and the idea of what they've been doing since the very start. They've asked this team to play a better team defense. They've asked the forwards to spend more time helping the defense out. And I've wondered if at some point the extra work that they would maybe have to take on, and that's a debate, right? Some people would say, no, every team does this. I'm not sure I believe that. I think the offensive players this season, with the roster the way it is, the offensive players have been asked to take on more of a defensive role than certain players in those offensive roles would on other teams. So it's the balance too tricky here. Does playing defense mean this team can't score, and does playing offense mean they can't defend?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, again, right now it looks like things are tough, and there's no doubt about that. The Jets are having trouble scoring goals. That, you can't sugarcoat that. That is a fact. If you score 6 times in a 5-game losing streak, then yes, right now it is difficult for the Jets to score goals. But having said that, we also expect that that's the strength of their hockey club. I mean, is the well going to go dry for the last 7 games? I wouldn't be mortgaging the house on that, Sean. I don't know if you would, but for me, it's much more difficult for them to buckle down defensively. So the fact that they, won the 5-on-5 game 1-0, I would say yes, that's something that they would build on as a group. But having said that, you got to find a way to score goals, especially when you're facing another team's backup. And again, we know backup goalies in the league are solid, but at the same time, you got to find a way to beat them. I mean, I think that the Jets did do a better job of trying to solve the forecheck, especially early. We noticed right away with Mike Smith's puck handling abilities not in the net and behind the net and knocking down dump-ins, the Jets were able to generate some more sustained pressure, but it just didn't translate into as much offense as they would like to generate from that. But again, they should be encouraged by the way they played defensively. Having said that, you got to find a way to marry the two together. Otherwise, you're just not going to find a way to go on a long playoff run.
Paul Audette here asks me, what did I think of the Stastny line? KFC continues
Sure.
to be non-existent in his opinion. To your point, I think having Koskinen in net really kind of turned the tide and evened things out a little bit as far as the forecheck that the Jets were able to employ. I thought that line did a little bit better there, but I'm with you on the idea that, I mean, there really wasn't a lot in the way of offense created in this game. And I'm not sure that I think that's it is a bad thing, but I guess I would couch it by saying I understand it. And you brought up the pregame, and one of the things I thought in this pregame was Paul Maurice had said beforehand that this could be one of those situations where, you catch fire and find your game right away, or it could be one of those things where you slowly build towards something. I think from what we've seen from this team in the past, there's a good example of it last season. They won a 5-game losing streak, and by the 3rd game, they were slowly building up. I think that's more likely what it's going to look like for the Winnipeg Jets to get to where they want to go. So I thought the first step taken tonight was what we saw. With the better 5-on-5 game. Blake Wheeler brought it up. He said we won that game 1-0 at 5-on-5, which, I mean, this is a team that likes to look at things positively. There's a lot of times this season we could look at them and say they lost the game 5-on-5 battle. It seems to be a theme with this team. But the fact that they went and made a point of doing that this evening, I thought helped them. I thought it's something that they can build confidence on. So I guess maybe on a night like this where I feel that they are in a really deep hole and they need to build towards something, I excuse them not generating much offensively. That said, Ken, that's got to come, and it's got to come fast because they are not generating near enough. And even this evening, a lot of their shots came from the outside. On a night where you're not going to try and generate a lot of offense, I think the least that you can do is get dirty and drive the puck towards the net. I thought there were great examples of Mason Appleton doing that in the 3rd period, and that's it. Other than that, you didn't see guys burying their head, driving the net. And the thing was, every time Mason Appleton did that, he created chaos, and it looked like there was going to be a scoring chance out of that, there were scoring chances that were created from that. If I have a criticism of the offense, when you've got big guys like Blake Wheeler, or you've got the speed of Kyle Connor, guys, just get to the net. Do your best to get to the net. If you're not getting there, fine, but try to get there. And that was one thing I thought was really missing on a night where you're facing a backup goaltender and could have tried to make his night harder than it was.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Appleton. I mean, he had a great net drive in the 3rd period. I mean, he got to the front of the net. He did a good job in these 2 games of getting to the front of the net for tip plays. It's just none of them were able to go for them. So, Joanne,
we need to talk about this.
Oh yeah,
upstairs, but yeah,
we will get there in a minute. I know someone had asked about Lowry. So for me, Sean, it's interesting. I with the fact that Lowry was in gold again today, if he's wearing gold again tomorrow, again, I think it's a pretty safe bet that he won't play Friday. The only thing for me, whereas the Jets aren't going to rush him back, but because there's a 2-day break before the game in Ottawa, I think there's a better chance that he plays in the 2nd game of the road trip. I wouldn't rule him out, but I definitely, again, I wouldn't say it's likely that Lowry plays right away. The Jets need Lowry to be at 100% for game 1. That's not they want to get him back before that, but there's no sense rushing him back for the 7th last game of the season. So for me, the Jets are going to be careful. But also, Sean, we've seen it. Adam Lowry looks like he's buzzing around and maybe ready to go. So again, I wouldn't rule him out, but I think it's too early to give a definitive answer about when he'll return.
A couple comments here about the perimeter play of the Jets, which we are just addressing here. But do you think this is, I wonder if this is a lot of what is being talked about in the room with the Jets when they say that they haven't been on their game for the last 10 to 15 games before this one. Where's that kind of ugly get to the slot kind of mentality?
Yeah, I mean, the Jets aren't necessarily, they're not generating a ton of lunch bucket offense. Sean, I certainly know where you're coming from. Again, we've discussed this topic, but this is a pretty good reminder of how valuable and how much Nikolai Ehlers generates in terms of offensive pressure, shooting, getting to the net with his speed, and also with Lowry. I mean, that's a big part of it as well. So again, do they need to try to get a little dirtier, greasier? Absolutely. When things aren't going well, those are the things that you have to do. But again, I think it was what you touched on earlier, Sean. When there's such a dedication to the defensive side, then they were a little bit passive when it came to offense. But again, I think there was probably enough offense in there to win the game had they been able to bear down around the net. But it's going to have to get better. There's no doubt about that.
I think we talked about it a little bit here, but this comment by Richard Faveri, what about them looking for the pass over shooting first mentality? I think there was a little bit of that on display tonight. I mean, hey, this is a skilled team that likes to make plays. They're good at doing that. But Paul Maurice has been saying for the last little while that those are the kind of plays that disappear as you head into the playoffs. And I do think that there needs to be, to Richard's point here, there needs to be kind of more of a shoot first, get to the net first, drive the net kind of attitude. Let's go back to this. Joanne, as she's saying, the smile on my face. So what she's talking about is in the past, I've said that with the expectation that Paul Maurice was going to go to Scheifele, Wheeler, and Connor for the playoffs, which he went to at the end of the game tonight. I don't think that means he's going to go and stay back with that, but he went to it in the crucial moment of the game where he wanted offense generated. I have said with Nick Ehlers in the lineup that I think the best option for that other top six line is Nick Ehlers, Andrew Kopp, and Paul Stastny, and then moving Pierre-Luc Dubois down onto the wing with Adam Lowry and kind of creating, that super line, because I don't think that we've seen enough. I personally don't think we've seen enough from Pierre-Luc Dubois that he should be one of your top three centers. So when he got moved down to that line, you turned to me tonight and you joked and you said, Pierre-Luc Dubois is one step closer to that spot that you're going to be in. When I asked Paul Maurice after the game about the moves that he made, moving Stastny up on that top line tonight and moving Pierre-Luc Dubois down, I want to get your take on what you heard from Paul Maurice and the explanation of what he thought about Pierre-Luc Dubois' game and where he sees it right now.
Yeah, I think it's a subject that we've discussed a lot when it comes to the Oilers, Sean. I think that Paul Maurice was trying to help Pierre-Luc Dubois build his confidence by playing him against Gaetan Haas on the third line. For the most part, to some shifts against the fourth line, but for the majority of the time they were out against that third unit. And I think he also wanted to try him with Matthew Perreault. That's something that a lot of our commenters have been mentioning also, that they wanted to maybe have a look at that. I thought those guys were pretty effective together, to be quite frank, at times. I know someone talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois' ice time. I don't think that's enough ice time for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think that the power plays maybe, factored into that decision a little bit. I mean, I didn't mind it overall, but again, if Dubois is going to move to the wing, I would prefer him to move to the wing in the top six. I think I'm going to stand by that. I know that we disagree on that, Sean, but at the same time, my eyes are open to it now, whereas before I didn't really think that there was any chance or any reason for them to do that, but I could see a possibility of that happening at some point. There's no doubt about that. Didn't mind Vesalainen, again, doing a nice job overall. I think, again, when Vesalainen gets to the point where he can find his shot off the rush, and as you mentioned, Sean, with that big body, if he can start getting to the net, I think then we're going to see him kind of take off. It was another example tonight. I would have liked to have seen Harkins get a couple of shifts up there with that line with Dubois and Perreault. I think that Harkins kind of gets a little bit more of that giddy up and that jump. I mean, maybe Vesalainen's a little bit more of a natural finisher, but I think that Harkins, like, you want Vesalainen to get where Harkins is. So for me, I think maybe giving Harkins a chance on that third line might make some sense. But again, they were probably looking for a little bit of stability out of that fourth line. But for me, that's one change that I would like to see made at some point if they're going to, see how things go.
So I want to tell you what I heard from Paul Maurice tonight when we asked
Sure.
about that. And I want to bring in this comment by Paul Audette, who says, "Hey, Sean, why would you limit PLD to such a small amount of ice time?" So what I heard when I asked Paul Maurice about taking Pierre-Luc Dubois off that top line alongside Blake Wheeler and Kyle Connor and moving him down was that Paul Maurice said he wanted to see him in a different matchup. He said his last 4 games, if you go back to the first of the last 4 games, the first 2 of the last 4 games, he said he loved his game. And I agreed with him. I thought he played really well, but they weren't getting those results that they were looking for. That's a line that needs to score, and it wasn't happening with him there. Paul Maurice said last game he didn't like him.
Right.
Tonight, he said there's 2 really strong lines that he's got to go up against, and he wanted to get him a better matchup. What I'm hearing when I hear that, Ken, is Pierre-Luc Dubois is not ready for the role that people keep talking about him in our chat room and saying the playoffs are coming. That's where we're going to see the true PLD. That's not what I heard tonight. What I heard from Paul Maurice is that he needs to find a softer challenge for Pierre-Luc Dubois for him to build his confidence. That's the stage we're at with 7 games left in the Winnipeg Jets season. So when Paul Audette asks me this question, what I will say time and time again is, hey, ice time is ice time. Guys who earn it are going to take it. I'm not saying I don't think that PLD has not earned it, but I will say is this: if you're going to go with a Wheeler, Scheifele, Kyle Connor line, then the second line has to be a choice in my mind between Paul Stastny at center or Pierre-Luc Dubois at center. And I'm unabashed to say this. I think that Paul Stastny has showed better at center this entire season than Pierre-Luc Dubois has. And it's about what you can do right now. So I'm going to go quick because we've gone over this a bunch of times. I think there's a bright future for Pierre-Luc Dubois, but this is right now. And I think Andrew Kopp has shown better up in that top 6 on the wing. Nick Ehlers, you're not going to move down. I don't think Blake Wheeler is going to get moved down, although I've heard the suggestion before. And I don't think you're doing anyone any favors if you move Kyle Connor down to that third line. So for me, Pierre-Luc Dubois, it's the only way for him to go. It's the only place for him to go if you want to try and maintain that. And I just thought what we heard tonight was an admission from the coach who said in the past, I want to see him here. I want to see him here. Look, people, Pierre-Luc Dubois has been moved everywhere in this lineup to try and get him to work. He's been given beneficial situations at every turn to try and get him going. I'm not saying that he's entirely failed, but we are at a stage in the season where the Jets need production. They need points. And your question is as simple as this: him at center or Paul Stastny at center, who gives you a better chance at doing that? And that's why I'm not moving him down there for it to be punitive. I'm saying it as simple as this, where you have to fit everyone in the lineup right now. I thought tonight was an admission that Pierre-Luc Dubois belongs in a spot that is less likely to be challenged by players like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And guess what, people? That's very likely who the Winnipeg Jets are going to be playing in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted it a little bit differently than that, Sean. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I do think he was looking for a softer spot in the lineup to play him, but that was in an effort to build confidence. So I don't think that Paul Maurice would be scared to play him against either one of those guys. I mean, again, right now, is he playing at an elite level where he could shut them down? No. But in a playoff series, I think you're going to need Pierre-Luc Dubois to have a role in shutting down one of those lines if they're playing on separate lines. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. And, yeah, there's angst. Great. I mean... Yeah.
This is a good point, too. I mean, this says something as well. That last game, Pierre-Luc Dubois came out, 2 games ago. Pierre-Luc Dubois was
because he was playing well that night.
Exactly.
Right, he was flying.
And I turned to you and I'd said, Stastny not out there. This is a statement that's being made. So I think going back to the way things were is a statement as well. He's been given his opportunities. And to me, the message that I get from Paul Maurice tonight in regards to Pierre-Luc Dubois is we've given the chances, we haven't got the results, and now we need to start making decisions based on getting results right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. But again, I also, what Paul Maurice also said was that he liked Dubois in 3 of the 4 games, and in 2 of those 3 games he was playing as a center in the top 6 and had quite a bit of success in those games as well. So
totally agree. I think
that what he was trying to do was, like we talked about, if you're trying to be even against McDavid or Draisaitl, you're looking for soft spots to try and win those matchups. And to this point, those other centers that have gone against the third line haven't won those matchups. So what I would say is that it was, and you're right, it was not done as a punitive measure. But again, I think you got to find a way to get them more than 10-50 or whatever it ended up being. Correct. But again, you're right. I mean, for sure, you're trying to find a way to gain confidence, but playing 11 minutes is probably not going to boost someone's confidence. But again, as you mentioned, you got to earn your ice time here, and that's part of the deal. But again, I know I've been defending Pierre-Luc Dubois for a long time, and I will continue to stand by what I believe is that when the games matter most, he is going to play his best hockey, whether that's on the second line or the third line. We'll find out. And again, the other part about that, the numbering doesn't matter. It's what role you're given. And if he's given a checking role, he has shown in the past he can embrace a checking role. I think that playing him with Matthew Perreault was a smart move because you have someone who's a tenacious forechecker, can create some chaos in the offensive zone. And what that also did tonight for Dubois was get him back involved in that board play, which is where he excels at, Sean, right? So with some of his other line mates, he wasn't getting as much done necessarily off the rush, but you're now taking him to an area where he can build on his strengths in terms of his offensive game. He was also doing a nice job of getting pucks to the net, which in a lot of nights where he was deferring, as Paul Maurice mentioned, he looked for his shot a little bit more. And again, that's when you're not playing with snipers like Kyle Connor or Nikolai Ehlers, maybe you're doing a good job of looking for your shot a little bit more. And I think that's another thing that we saw from Dubois tonight.
You had talked about him showing up when the games matter more, and I had started thinking about this situation in that, I mean, does second place even matter at this stage anymore? Now, I'm going to couch this question. I'm going to throw it to you, Ken. I'm going to couch this question by saying I looked at the standings, and the Montreal Canadiens are 6 points behind the Winnipeg Jets, and they play their next game against each other, and they've got a game in hand. So if Montreal, who has been struggling just as bad as the Jets have over the last stretch, probably more so, if Montreal happens to beat the Jets and happens to win their game in hand, all of a sudden they're 2 points back. But does any of this matter anymore? Because I look at this, the Oilers are 3 points up. They've got 2 games in hand. You're probably looking at the second place has set sail and home ice advantage in the playoffs has set sail. If the Jets finish third or fourth at this stage, other than trying to get their game in a place where they can have some kind of pride and good feeling in it, does it matter? They look like they're going to have to go through Edmonton and Toronto regardless without home ice advantage anyway. So does any of that matter anymore, or is it just a pure straight-on focus for the Winnipeg Jets over the next 7 games about just getting their game to a specific spot?
Yeah, 7 games to find their playoff level. What we've seen, Sean, in the last stretch of games, including 3 games with the Jets and Oilers, is that the Oilers are clearly at a playoff level. And so are the Toronto Maple Leafs, who prior to coming to Winnipeg had lost 5 consecutive games. Yes, 2 of those games went to extra time. But the 2 teams that the Jets conceivably have to beat in order to advance and get out of the North, they found their level, but those teams still think they can find another level. Right now, the Jets are trying to find a level that they were at earlier in the year. So right now, they didn't measure up. We talk about measuring sticks. Well, right now, the Jets did not measure up against Toronto or Edmonton. That's a fact. They know it. But today was the closest that they had to measuring up. So again, this is not about, rose-colored glasses. But the facts are, this is the best they played in the last 5 games. So the Jets can't be sitting here saying they have no chance of beating those teams. They know they have to elevate their level the way that the teams around them have, as they've found some separation in the standings. I mean, back to your question, the next question would be, which team do you think the Jets would have a better chance beating in a playoff series? Like some people had mentioned in our comments, are the Jets almost better off dropping to 4th right now? Again, they're not going to tank to get to 4th, but would they be better off against the Oilers or would they be better off against the Leafs? I mean, that's an interesting debate for the last stretch of games here. But again, I'm going to stick with this. It's funny. I mean, anyone who just looks at the stats sheet and sees Connor McDavid had 3 points would say, well, the Jets had an incredible difficulty containing McDavid tonight. Well, outside of 2 bursts maybe, You didn't notice McDavid tonight at 5-on-5 the way you did the other night, but it still wasn't enough. So again, that's the thing that's causing frustration, Sean, right? So in a night when Connor McDavid is held in check, you look down and how did this guy get 3 points? He wasn't flying around with a puck on his stick all the time and getting robbed at with great frequency. Here's the most important part of this game. The Jets playing better and not feeding the Oilers transition was important, but our colleague in Edmonton, Mark Spector, said it pretty succinctly in a tweet today. This was the first time in this series that Connor Hellebuck looked again like a Vezina Trophy winner against the Oilers. We've seen it a lot this year against other teams. This was the first time he looked that way against the Oilers. And again, the best chance the Jets have of beating the Oilers or the Leafs includes Connor Hellebuck being the best player on the ice for both teams.
Let's explore what you were talking about. Which of these two teams do you think they've got a better shot against? Because I wonder about the idea that, so they've lost 6 straight games against the Oilers. It doesn't look like they're a team that they want to run into. But I wonder about Toronto, and I wonder about the guys that they picked up, where they're heading with that lineup. And I also wonder about the series that they've played against them. We talked about this, Ken, heading into that last couple of games that we covered against the Toronto Maple Leafs, that it was a weird series between them in that we really felt that we hadn't figured out a lot of the stuff between these two teams. Yep. One, because new players were coming in and changing. 2, because the last game that the Jets played against Toronto and they looked really good, Austin Matthews wasn't in and Jack Campbell had an off night. 3, because that series earlier in the season when the Jets went to Toronto and took, took 4 of 6 points off of them.
Yep.
Sorry, 5 of 6 points off of them in 3 games. That 2 of those games were domineering performances by the Leafs that Connor Hellebuck stole from them.
Yep.
I don't know that I actually believe that the Toronto Maple Leafs are a better matchup for the Winnipeg Jets. I actually do think, and I still think, that it's the Edmonton Oilers. Now, it sounds strange because they can't seem to figure out the Oilers, but at some point, you should be able to have the ability to unlock your depth against that Oilers team. It makes sense. The Leafs are deep and they've got killer players at the top end who can kill you. The Oilers have killer players who can kill you at the top end, but they should have guys that you can take advantage of. And I guess I'll get to this, Ken. I wonder, we talked about this before we came on air. Here's a scary thought. The Jets have lost 5 straight games, but let's not lose the fact of the sight that they've lost 5 straight games against the Edmonton Oilers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The scary thought in all this is, and you talked about it, those teams raising their game, they think they can raise it more. What if the Oilers and Leafs have raised their game and the Winnipeg Jets, as bad as they've looked, just haven't been able to follow and can't follow?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting observation. I don't think that's the case, but I mean, again, they're going to have to show it. I mean, ultimately, you have to prove it, right? I mean, it does matter what you and I think, and I'm with you. I think, as most people are saying the opposite, but I do think that the Oilers are the best matchup for the Jets as well, even though they have not found a way to have success in that series. And that's not to suggest the Jets will easily dispose of the Oilers. The Oilers are full value for the improvements that they have made in all of the important areas that matter. The biggest question marks about the Oilers going into the year were goaltending and their defense. Both have not only have they not been a weakness, those have been strengths for the Oilers. That's one of the big reasons they've been able to pass the Jets. They've been getting great goaltending from Mike Smith, and their defensive play has been exceptional. I mean, their team defense has improved so much. But again, I will reiterate this. The Oilers lost 3 games in a row to the Leafs to the tune of 13-1. Nobody was calling them a defensive juggernaut back then, but they've buckled down and dug in, and now they look to me like they're the best defensive team in this division, with all due respect to Toronto in terms of their play. And what we saw on a number of occasions, including one from Jesse Puljujärvi. How about that back pressure play where he went and pickpocketed one of the Jets? That was exceptional. We see that from Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner with great frequency. Now you're seeing it with the Oilers. I've been very impressed by the strides they've been taking. been taking, pardon me. But again, I was in the bubble in Edmonton. Everyone expected the Oilers to dismantle the Chicago Blackhawks, a team that was not supposed to be in the playoffs. So again, this is not to deflect away from the Jets, who have their own playoff demons that they need to overcome. But both Edmonton and Toronto also have very deep tributaries of stress when it comes to postseason hockey. And all of those teams have something to prove when it matters. And guess what? Do it when it matters. That's what I need to see from all of those teams. And the Jets are included in that. But they're not the only team that has the weight of expectations on them going into these playoffs. So again, can they find it in the last 7 games, Sean? That is the $1 million question right now. Because right now, the Jets are not playing at a playoff level. You know it, I know it, and the Jets know it. What are they going to do about it? That's what we're going to find out.
Well, and this is the concern is, Rick Buck here says playoffs is a new season, and he's entirely right about that. But, asked a question in the pregame availability, and the Jets are the first team that will tell you, or I think it was Kyle Connor who said, there's no switch. There's no just flipping a switch and having it done, getting it done in the playoffs. It's working on your game and building up confidence in your game and getting to a point where you have that confidence. So I wonder, I think, Ken, the Jets have a golden opportunity ahead of them right now. They've got Montreal, who's just as rotten as they are recently. They've got Vancouver, who came back with a little bit of pizzazz, but now it looked like they've fallen back down to earth. 6 games against teams that are 6 games against teams below them in the standings now before they finish off what could end up being a meaningless game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. 6 games that look to me to be a good opportunity against teams they could build confidence against. Do you think that they're set up well to regain their game in these last 7 games?
Yeah, I mean, again, proof will be in the pudding. I think, of course, they would have an opportunity to, get some things sorted out, which, again, they took a step on that today. But again, it's not about steps. It's about incremental growth, and they need to ramp up a significant level because, as we mentioned, this level right now is not good enough. They did a lot of things well defensively. They had much, much better puck management and decision-making. But at the same time, there were a couple of plays. Impressive job. You're not going to get me on a super stumper, but that is a very, very impressive job. I'm just going to tap dance around that and get my train of thought back. But there were still a couple
Good job,
things.
Wrench Doozer.
Yeah, well done. Again, a couple of things just in terms of, just game awareness and things of that nature. I mean, Kyler Yamamoto comes out of the box. There were 3 seconds to go in the power play when the face-off took place. You cannot allow a breakaway to happen when that's the case. There needs to be better communication when it comes to those sorts of situations, right? That's just situational hockey.
Right.
You always have one defenseman that will cheat over knowing that there's a guy coming out of the box. So, I mean, again, just one of those things where it was a bit just small brain cramp, but it could have cost them. That's another great save by Hellebuck with the glove, basically snow angel kind of save that he makes with the glove. But that kind of thing can happen. We talked about it several times upstairs, Sean. A couple of times the Jets had these incredible shifts in the offensive zone. All of a sudden, tic-tac, the puck is out, and it's a 2-on-1. Yeah. There's Draisaitl, and there's Cahoon, and Hellebuck has to dive across and make just a ridiculous save on a 2-on-1, because otherwise, the Jets look up, and it's a 2-0 game again, and they're looking around saying, how did they play well for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden they're down 2-0 again?
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, the Oilers have definitely frustrated the Jets, but I'm with you. I think the Jets probably have a better shot against the Oilers than the Leafs. But again, they need to raise their level. Let's see if they can do it.
I'll say this about the Oilers compared to the Leafs. The Leafs were a team that I thought the Jets were able to get a push for segments of the game against. To your point, and it's a really, really good point, is I'm trying to think of those stretches of a game where the Jets have been able to dominate the Oilers. And I think that play you're talking about between Draisaitl and Cahoon is the perfect example. That was a dominant shift by the Winnipeg Jets where they sewed that line up, and then that line turned around, took the puck the other way, got a good scoring chance, and then sewed the Jets up in for the last half of the shift. I mean, it's the mentality of a team that is not panicking when they're on their heels and are able to push at that tail end of the shift. I thought the Jets did a really good job at the beginning of the year of locking teams up in their own zone, and then when the teams got out of their own zone, they did this to Montreal all the time. When Montreal would get out of their zone, they were too tired to do anything with it. This Oilers team doesn't get tired, especially those top two guys. It's absolutely remarkable. I'm going to switch gears here quick. T. Konopoli, or do you want to say something before we move on? No,
just
I'm
one quick thing.
Okay,
sorry, one quick one. Kay Alexander, there is no salary cap in the postseason, so that will be that won't apply to the Leafs there. In terms, they can have Anderson and Campbell both on the roster and sort it out to see who's between the pipes there.
Okay, T. Konopoli is asking what a lot of people have been asking and talking about. Was Ben's third game? Have you seen anything you like, or should Stanley hop in, anybody else be in? So I'm going to say this. I don't want to get into the whole debate about the whole thing. I think Heinola, if you were going to, I mean, I guess you could try him, but I think they've run out of runway to kind of get an idea of who he is and who he's going to be. I'll say this about Heinola. The Jets for years have said they like to bring guys in to play the role that they want them to be brought up to play. So, for example, Kyle Connor went down and dominated the AHL, and when they brought him up as a scorer. That's how they brought him in. Same thing with Adam Lowry. When they brought him up, they wanted him to play a specific role. Ville Heinola didn't get drafted by this organization to walk in and play as the sixth defenseman. That's not how this works with this team. It's not what they've shown in the past. So I understand they want to bring him in at a point where they want to bring him in a top four role. Is there space for him there? I think there potentially could be, but I think the way that they want to build this roster is big and small, and so I don't think he necessarily fits on that top, although Ken clearly wants to see Pionk and Morrissey down the stretch and wants to see them go there. I just don't think the coach wants that. I think he wants the big small thing. So Ben fits the mold of the big small. I thought what we saw from Ben in the last couple of games is a veteran who you know exactly what you're going to get from him, and I think that is exactly what Paul Maurice wants. So what do I think of him? I think he came in and showed us exactly what he's shown every team he's been. What he did in Montreal, what he did when he was in Dallas, what he did when he was in Vancouver, and I think that's what Paul Maurice is going to want in that spot, as a guy where he knows what to expect. I know everyone out there is looking for a savior to come into the lineup, and Logan Stanley to come in and get lots of shots on net and maybe be game breakers. I just think expecting that from a sixth defenseman is unrealistic expectations. So I would say, in my personal opinion, what we are going to see is him grabbing that role. I don't think he's grabbed it yet. I think that's where we're headed, though. Ken, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Jordy Ben was fine this evening. Again, the Jets at 5-on-5 were fine overall. They didn't have a lot of glaring, turnovers or, things of that nature. Ty, I know you mentioned the ELC. The ELC would count in the playoffs as well. Same thing happened with Sean Monahan when he joined the Flames, so I don't think it's a business decision. And as some folks have also pointed out, of course there are some benefits to having an entry-level contract slide, but it also usually means that by the end of that contract, you're probably going to have to pay more. So that's also another thing to consider on the other side of the coin. Again, I thought the Ben was fine. I could make again, I said before the game, would I like to see of Heinola against the Oilers? For sure. I do think what the decision that was made to have him on the taxi squad, I think we will see him on this road trip. Otherwise, I think that Maurice and company would have just left him with the Manitoba Moose to play that game against the Stockton Heat tomorrow. I think they have him on the road trip because they want him to get it in some action. But having said that, I think Ben was fine. Logan Stanley definitely generates more from the back end. Jordy Ben has that experience factor, as you mentioned. And Brent, I understand that Jordy Ben has been better on the right side this year. What I would also counter to that point is he was better on the right side because he was playing with Quinn Hughes. So I believe that had a major factor on his success and his successful numbers in terms of why that maybe looks that way analytically. And that's to take nothing away from Jordy Ben, because you have to be a smart player to play on a pairing like that with a Quinn Hughes. But Jordy Ben has spent the majority of his career on the left side, whether it was in Dallas, Montreal, or in Vancouver. So I would say that's a far larger factor. That's not to say he can't go over to the right side if you wanted to give someone a break, but I think there's more of a likelihood that he would play on the left-hand side when it comes to that situation.
Ken, Montreal next. After that, a bunch of teams that are very likely to miss the playoffs. And I wonder, we may see Heinola down the stretch. I expect to see him down the stretch. But Paul Maurice, a few games ago, said that he was going to be using these games as an addition to see how these guys played against teams they'd run into in the playoffs. He had said that we were going to see Heinola again against Toronto specifically, or he had at least alluded to it. We never saw that. The fact that what we have left other than Montreal and very likely an inconsequential game at the end of the season against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the fact that the bulk of the games left that the Jets have to play is against non-playoff teams, is the opportunity already gone to see Stanley? We've seen Stanley before this, but to see Heinola and decide based on his play against those teams that it would be worth going with him in the playoffs?
I would say that in the last 7 games, it would be difficult for him to earn a Game 1 start. I think that if the Jets had that under consideration, he would have had a much longer runway to get to that point. I think that Logan Stanley has a better shot of being in the Game 1 lineup. We know that Heinola has a much higher upside in terms of his offensive zone play, in his exits, all of those things. He's done a great job. His games with the Moose were quite tidy, from what I understand, and we know that he has continued to grow in his game. But again, if the Jets' plan was to have him in Game 1, I would think that we would have seen him more down the stretch run.
And I guess I say it like this. I always think there's a possibility that he draws into the lineup during the playoffs. But don't you think for it to get to that stage, it's either going to take injury or it's going to be them trying to shake up the lineup, which probably means that they're in a bad spot and fighting to stay in the playoffs?
Yeah, I just would reiterate. I mean, Sean, we've covered the playoffs a long time. I think Joel Hanley got a game in for Dallas in the Stanley Cup final. If not in the final, certainly in the Western Conference final. There have been numerous occasions. I mean, in that series with St. Louis, we saw Dallas having to insert defensemen that had not played in the playoffs and were mostly American Hockey League guys that were jumping right into a series that was rough and tumble against the St. Louis Blues in that series there as well. So again, things can happen. We understand the frustration, and again, it's hard to be patient. I get it, but I think that Ville Heinola's best hockey is going to be played beyond this season. But that's not to say that he might not find himself in the lineup and finding a way to make a contribution at some point. But again, right now it looks unlikely that he will be in the Game 1 lineup. But again, who knows what the next 7 games brings.
Ken, I thought that was a really good point. You go back to that series. It was an interesting series to cover that both you and I were on, that Dallas and St. Louis series on the way to St. Louis winning that cup. You brought in a good point. They brought in a lot of young players who played significant roles down the stretch.
With Texas.
And I remember Craig Berube and Montgomery with Dallas as well. Every time they made a change in that series, that change played a key role in that game. So, I mean, you hope that the Jets are at a spot with a player like Ville Heinola that if they get to that stage in the playoffs, that they know what to expect from him and know how to put him into a situation to succeed. Okay, I want to go back to the scoring having dried up, and I wonder, Ken, these new lines that the Winnipeg Jets went with over the last couple of games, and I guess they did switch it up here a little bit as well. We thought that the new lines that they'd gone with in the first place were a little out of the box. We hadn't seen them yet. I was taken aback by them, taken aback in the way that I really didn't see those lines coming. And usually we've got a pretty good gauge on what is going to be coming. Do you place any responsibility for the lines as we've seen them over the last couple of games as being the reason for scoring drying up? Or are we just at a stage where there's no good feelings in the room and no one's accomplishing anything because confidence is low?
Yeah, I mean, again, we knew the lines were changing because of the injury, Sean. So, again, I understand you'd like to keep combination parts of the lines together, and I think we did see that to a degree. But I just think teams go through stretches like this. Again, the fact that it took the Jets this long to have their first long losing streak, I think says something about their ability to bounce back. Right now, they're being tested. I mean, this is the biggest stretch of adversity the Jets have faced. There is zero doubt about that. And again, we're going to find out again, can they find their way out of it? That's up to them to discuss and work out. But we know they have bounced back in the past, and we'll see if they have that ability now. I know a lot of people have asked Sean about the Wheeler penalties. So again, I think that the first penalty, the tripping minor, was more bad luck in positioning. It is definitely tripping. I think that Wheeler was making the case that Yamamoto entered his space, so he should have had the right to that ice. And again, I know some folks are up in arms with the high sticking penalty. Again, I think that if you go back and look at the play, it's just bad luck. I mean, I asked Blake Wheeler specifically because you could tell he was talking to the referee before the call was made and then reviewed. Is it bad timing? Of course, and the Oilers scored, so it's a bad penalty, but it's not like this was a lazy play where he obviously made a blatant attempt to hit someone in the face. He basically hooked Ethan Bear underneath the arm, and his stick obviously caught it. Wheeler admitted that he cut him open, but it just seemed like such an unlikely thing, whereas he was just trying to impede the back check a little bit, and it just got him in a we were talking about wrestling earlier today, Sean. Again, this looked like a vintage wrestling where it caught the ketchup packet underneath the lip, and then all of a sudden there's this big pool of blood, and it ends up being a 4-minute minor. So again, I think that was more a matter of bad luck. Were the penalties poor? Of course, they were costly. You can't say that they weren't, but I think that Blake Wheeler's effort was pretty high in the game itself. He was quite physical and was involved in the game, and I don't think that either one of those would go down as lazy penalties. He was trying to make a play happen in the neutral zone on the first one, and he was trying to impede a back check on the second, and it ended up being more a matter of bad luck than a lazy play per se.
You know what we haven't talked about enough, Ken? We have not talked enough about, and you touched on it tonight, the fact that they kept them off the score sheet at 5-on-5, but we have not talked enough about McDavid's domination of this team and what they need to do to limit him. So you went through it on our Hit with Sportsnet right before we came on here. Go through the stats, go through what he's accomplished this season against the Winnipeg Jets, and let's you and I do the Winnipeg Jets a favor and figure out how to shut down number 97.
Well, Sean, we said it this way. Even in a game where the Jets were pretty impressive in terms of limiting his 5-on-5 generation and production, they gave up 3 points, which made 9 consecutive multi-point games. He's scored 22 points against the Jets. Rick, you're exactly right. Good job of following along with the math. And holy smokes, 84 points. I mean, we went into this week thinking, you know what, 100 is going to be really tough. What has McDavid done since that time? All he's done is go 3-3-4-3 at a time when he needs to average roughly 2 points a game down the stretch. You think, it'll be really tough. Well, and then he goes out and rips off, again, not great at math, but to me that's 13 points in 4 games. It's just absolutely ridiculous, the job that he was able to do in the season series. And what can they do to shut him down? Well, don't turn the puck over in bad spots. Don't feed into the transition game. And then hope that the Vezina winning goaltender can bail the guy out, because that's really the only way that you can stop him. The Jets did a better job today, Sean, much better than the other night, of getting a body on him, at least to a degree down low. But again, this guy, you get him, if he gets the puck in space, you can forget about it. You're not going to catch him, and you're definitely not going to be able to catch the guy with him in all likelihood. So again, they limited the McDavid breakaways. That's a step in the right direction. He wasn't, as effective at 5-on-5, but at the end of the day, they still had the same result. So again, I understand the folks' frustration, but this was the template for trying to at least contain Connor McDavid at 5-on-5. What can you do? Can you find a way to do that and then take away the power play points? Well, that's the caramel secret for them right now.
So here's the interesting part of that, because we finally get a situation where Scheifele goes head-to-head against him and seems to figure it out. Asked him about it afterwards. You talked about it, the caramel secret, the template. This tonight is what they need to do to shut him down at 5-on-5. Power play is another thing. Let's address that later. But Scheifele finally having success in this role and asking him after the game, finally building that confidence in having that role. But he does so with two very defensive players. He does so with the wingers from the third line on his wing. Can Scheifele do that without those players? Does it require those two type of players for Mark Scheifele to be the guy to go up against Connor McDavid and shut him down? Or do you have to find I guess this is where things get weird with them constantly juggling lines. If they figure this out and they play the Edmonton Oilers, is that the line we see go up against Connor McDavid? Or have we blended the lines again, and is Mark Scheifele getting a try at it with Blake Wheeler and Kyle Connor on his wings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's more likely that we'd see Lowry in that situation. Again, I think it was important for Scheifele to be able to do the job at 5-on-5, and I think that the Scheifele line did a quite a good job with Kopp and Appleton against McDavid in this game. And no, Ty, you're wrong. It is 22 points. He had 3 tonight. He had 19 going into the game, so it is 22. But yeah, I mean, I think can you see what happens? I mean, I'm not sure. I think it's more likely to see Lowry in that head-to-head. But again, we'll see what the comfort level is. And I mean, you mentioned it. We know that Paul Maurice has trusted that line before. That line hasn't had success against McDavid. So, and again, I don't think that Scheifele will be playing with Kopp and Appleton in the playoffs. So, I don't think that will be their number one option. But it'll be super interesting. And the other part, Sean, that we should talk about here that we didn't really get into when you talked about the play of Stastny. Stastny has shown that he's done a pretty good job against Draisaitl in the head-to-heads also. Yes, Lowry has also, but in those other times, Stastny's done a great job in the head-to-head against Draisaitl. So, I mean, that's another part of the equation that we'll have to look into. In terms of, can PLD shut down McDavid in the playoffs? It's possible, but it depends on what line he's playing with.
I mean, again, the fact that he was taken away from those guys tonight is an admission for me from Paul Maurice that he doesn't think he's there at that stage. Here's
hang on, I would disagree. I think he's giving him the last 7. This was supposed to be step 1 in terms of the confidence, in terms of maybe potentially getting his confidence up to the point where maybe he could go PLD against him in the playoffs. But we'll see.
Why does he not put Lowry up against McDavid?
Oh, he will, because he's had success there. No, I think that's his first choice. But again, back to your point, maybe Dubois is playing on a line with him against McDavid.
Oh man, if I called that from the beginning, Ken, that would be something else. Hey, the forecheck that they got working tonight, this to me has been the real difference in this series. And I wonder if we're looking at this as a confidence builder and we're looking at this as a step back for the Winnipeg Jets, is it a little bit of smoke and mirrors? Because Corey, who's on here trolling people and getting called out for trolling people, our Sportsnet camera guy in Edmonton, had said before the game, and I give him credit for this. He'd said that Koskinen being in the net entirely changes the Oilers' breakout. It makes them more susceptible to a forecheck. So here's the question. Did the Jets get better at the forecheck tonight? Did the Jets potentially figure out something about the Edmonton Oilers? Or did the Jets just benefit from a backup goalie who does not move the puck nearly as well as Mike Smith?
Sean, you already know the answer, and both things can be true, and they were. So was it definitely a part of it? Of course. I mean, Mike Smith is. We talked about this in the morning before we finally figured out when Mike Smith came on for extra work that he wasn't going to bother playing tonight, and that it ruined one part of our hit to tee up the game. Yeah, I mean, for sure that was part of it. But here's the thing. When you have a goalie like Mike Smith who handles the puck a lot, and again, back to that series that we were talking about, Stars and Blues, Ben Bishop is that type of player. So when you have a goalie that can move the puck, it acts like a third defenseman. Of course it helps matters. When you have that happening, the Jets need to do a much better job of one thing or the other. You either need a good cross-ice dump or a soft chip into the corner that is outside the area where Mike Smith is eligible to play the puck. Can they do that? They haven't really got that thing going a lot in this series. However, let's see how it goes as when the games matter most. But again, it was a step in the right direction for the Jets when it comes to that. But again, they are going to have to do it against Mike Smith, and they won't have an opportunity to do that until the playoffs. And sorry, I want to say something to Yosemite Sam. I'm sorry. Have you not been watching McDavid against other teams the last few years? The guy does not have trouble putting up points against other teams. Come on now, wake up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Jeff Hamilton popped in here. We love Jeff, and he comes in and he says Connor Hellebuyck is going to have to be Vezina worthy, back to his Vezina self for them to win that series. Here's the big question, because we talk about the Jets not being able to get it done against the Edmonton Oilers. Part of that has been Hellebuyck has looked very human against the Edmonton Oilers. Why is that, Ken? And is there something that you can point to that is correctable?
Well, again, today he had no chance on either goal. I mean, the first one, it was an absolutely perfect screen by Alex Chason. And in the other one, I think, unfortunate for Dylan DeMello, he got into the path of the shot from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. A lot of people are saying, oh, you got to have that. Well, you can't. It's generally tough to stop what you can't see unless it hits you. I disagree, Derek, completely. He didn't see it. Watch the back angle. Watch the net cam. DeMello was right in the way. He didn't see it. I'm sorry, I just don't think that that's the case. Anyways, what have the Oilers been doing? I mean, again, let's look at the highlight reel from a lot of the goals, including the other night. How many 2-on-1 goal one-timers where, again, Hellebuyck either gets a piece of it or gets his body in a position to where he can almost stop it. And then the breakaways. I mean, they're not making him look human. They're, been able to score, 26 goals because of the quality of the chances. It's not like Connor Hellebuyck's given up a bunch of muffins against the Oilers in this series. So that to me is not a concern. But Jeff's right, and this is what I was saying on the pregame show. I know the people didn't like it. 7-2 means absolutely nothing if Connor Hellebuyck plays at an elite level. He is the great equalizer. He's going to have to do it in the playoffs, but for the Jets the Jets' path to win includes Connor Hellebuyck stymieing McDavid and Draisaitl and playing at a Vezina level. I mean, there's nothing around that. And the other part of it, Sean, they'll need their offense to get cooking, and they've had trouble doing that against Mike Smith this year.
Here's the issue, is you just said it yourself. You're talking about a bunch of goals that Connor Hellebuyck hasn't been able to stop because he has no chance on them. Is that not the biggest issue in this series, is that his team is not giving him enough chances to stop the puck against this team? And I'm going to go back and couch this by saying Connor Hellebuyck says he works well when the team keeps shots to an area that he knows they're going to come from. What is it about this Oilers team? And I'm not even going to include the 2-on-1s and the breakaways and stuff like that. Let's maybe just go into the power play specifically for this question, because we saw it. It's fresh. We saw it tonight. But the Jets power play, when it's working really well, is running out and being really aggressive and keeping teams to the outside. This Oilers team, I've noticed, does a really good job of bunching the Jets players into the middle, and that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins goal you're talking about is an example of them scoring on a fairly easy play where it's just McDavid up to the top, over to Nugent-Hopkins, and he's in a shooting place where he's able to use DeMello as the screen. What is working so well with this Oilers power play that they're able to compress the Jets in a way that the Jets don't usually allow that to happen?
Well, again, because you have to respect McDavid, right? So then who's the least dangerous option on that group? Again, no offense to Nugent Hopkins, but he's the least dangerous taking a wrist shot from the middle of the circle. But the shot became more dangerous because of the screening element. I mean, Tyson Barrie has been ripping one-timers from the top all series long against the Jets. And then when you have Draisaitl and McDavid as the other real shooting options, I mean, pick your poison. These guys are there's a reason why they're in the top, 3 or 4 in the NHL in the power play. They've got a lot of great options. And again, as I mentioned, the screen from Chiasson has been important throughout the series as well. He's done a nice job of getting to the net.
All right, Kenny, that's it for us tonight. We're going to keep this to an hour. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I know it's been a frustrating couple of games here. 5 straight shows where things haven't gone that well. The one thing I'll say, and we really do appreciate it, as always, everyone's showing up and they're helping drive the conversation, and they've done it in a really respectful way. And we appreciate that. We know people get frustrated, and we know there's a lot of passion involved with this. And we know that people can show up and not be in a good mood, and it can reflect and things can go sour. We've worried about that, not because we don't think we have a great audience, but because it's human nature to go down that road. We didn't want to get into a place where people were making inappropriate comments or going too far. We want to thank you all for being really, really great and a really great part of this show, and taking 5 games, especially that one after the 4th loss, the 6-1 loss, and handling this in a really positive way that has allowed us to keep this show going and keep it fun. Ken, you got something to say?
Yeah, quick one. Yosemite Sam, thank you for coming. I had to reserve one wake up, and I'm sorry it came your way. We appreciate you. I don't think you've been into too many, so that's done in jest and with lots of love for sure. And one more quick one before we go to shut her down. Let's promote the Friday show while we got an audience here.
Yeah, let's get at it, because it's the next time people are going to see us. We do our long form podcast every Friday, and we're going to have Kevin Weeks and Gene Principe on. I'm excited for Gino because I grew up watching him on Sportsline on CK&D, and I think he's got some great stuff that we can talk about. And of course, he covers the Oilers and does their broadcast, so that'll be fresh. And we can talk about what is very likely going to be the first round matchup between those two teams. And Kevin Weeks, who really interesting character that we're going to be able to dig into on that show. So come join us. We'd love to see you. That's always, we do it live at 9:00 a.m. every Friday. If you don't catch us live, you can always go and check it out where you're checking this out now, on my Facebook platform, Ken's Twitter platform, or the best place to find us is go to Kenny and Renny on YouTube. If you're there, subscribe, like our videos, check them out. Once again, really appreciate everyone showing up. A really good audience tonight. A lot of people. We know you're frustrated, but you handled it well. You handled it with class, and that's why we love you, Jets fans. Appreciate your time. See you Friday morning, and if not, then we'll see you on our Instagram pregame before the Montreal game on Friday, or the post game right here after the Montreal game. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great evening.